Hi class, today we look at two of the most popular elements in HTML used for creating graphics and animations. They're called Canvas and SVG. We have seen two slides on these. There are 2 pages in our textbook describing them. With our presentation here today, we're going to look at the basics of these two. So what is the idea with each one of these? How do they compare? What's the differences between the two? And then also look at a few examples that will help us learn some of the really basic commands for drawing lines, rectangles, circles, paths, displaying text, and coloring what we draw on the screen. The canvas element, it's used for drawing graphics. It's really just a container, as you'll see in the code. So people need to use a scripting language, which nearly always is JavaScript. There are multiple methods for drawing paths, boxes, circles, text, and adding images. We're going to see some of those in a few minutes. Conceptually, SVG is very similar in that it is a container for graphics as well. It's really just a container, and then all the methods for drawing paths, boxes, circles, text, and images are XML. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. If we need to compare the two, like I said, SVG is XML based. It's really a document, it's not a script. And since it's based on XML, it is case sensitive. And it requires all the tags to be closed. If you remember this from our coding with XHTML at the beginning of the course. Canvas, on the other hand, draws the 2D graphics on the fly with a scripting language like JavaScript. In SVG, each drawn shape is remembered as an object. And if attributes of an SVG object are changed, the browser can automatically re-render the shape. In Canvas, everything is rendered pixel by pixel. Once the graphic is drawn, it is forgotten by the browser. If its position should be changed, the entire scene needs to be redrawn, including any objects that might have been covered by the graphic. Okay, Canvas doesn't have any support for event handlers, and in general it offers better performance, especially if there's a lot going on, if you've got lots of images and a lot of animation. SVG does offer support for event handlers, and it's considered to have a relatively poorer performance if there's too many items that need to be drawn on the screen. So continuing with the comparison of the two and a discussion of when to use one, when the other. Canvas is resolution dependent. Like I said, it doesn't support event handlers. It's got relatively poor text rendering capabilities. On the upside, you can save the resulting images as PNG or JPEG, something you cannot do with SVG. And it's well suited for graphic intensive games. Okay. SVG is resolution independent. It's got support for event handlers. It's really best suited for applications with large rendering areas, such as Google Maps, for example. It is relatively slow rendering if there's complex animation or graphics that need to be displayed, and it's not suited for game applications. The next thing I wanted to do was compare the support for these two. And from what I saw, it turns out that both of them are really well supported today. So as you can see, the next two slides, both Canvas and SVG are pretty much supported by all the modern browsers. I went to the caniuse.com website. You type in a feature that you need to find out how well supported it is in the different browsers. And like I said, it turns out both Canvas and SVG are really well supported. So we don't have to worry about our animations and graphics not showing up in our browsers. The Canvas and SVG coordinate system is what I like to call the computer science coordinate system. It's really used in nearly all programming languages and computer science applications. The origin of the system is in the top left corner. That's where the 0, 0 is. The x-axis or the x coordinate grows horizontally to the right, and the y-axis grows vertically, going downwards. So please remember this. This is very important. This is in this coordinate system is used, like I said, it's ubiquitous. It's used everywhere in computer science. Okay, now let's turn to the actual coding. What do we need to do to make this work? Um, the canvas tag is what we need to create canvas drawings. I do have a link to a really detailed canvas reference at the end of this presentation. Today we're only going to see the very basics. And we're going to see a few examples that will show us how to draw things like lines, rectangles, circles, and text. With Canvas, there's two ways to display an image. One would be to use one or more of the three functions that draw rectangles on the canvas. So before we look at some of the examples, these are the basics that you're seeing here. Once we create the canvas element, we can draw rectangles with the help of these three. Fill rect to create a rectangle that is filled with a certain color, or as they call it, style. Stroke rect for creating an outline of a rectangle, and clear rect works like an eraser. So you set the rectangle width and height, and you basically erase everything with this command. So this one draws a filled rectangle. This one here draws a rectangular outline, and this one here clears the specified rectangular area, making it fully transparent. In the example that I have down here, we first draw the black square, 100 pixels wide and 100 pixels tall. Then we use the clear rect command to erase 60 by 60 pixels in the middle of that black square. So essentially we draw a Y square in the middle of the black square. And then finally, with the stroke rect, we create an outline of a third rectangle, which is right there in the middle, 50 by 50. A quick example that shows you how to use those three. Drawing paths is the other way for creating a drawing in Canvas. So how does this work? The begin path command creates a new path. Once created, future drawing commands are directed into the path and used to build up the path. There's a whole slew of path methods, like for example what you see here on the right side. I'm using move to, line to. We're going to see these in just a moment. But the path methods basically allow you to construct the path. When you're done constructing the path, you close it. So this one really just adds a straight line to the path going to the start of the current path. And then at the very end, you either stroke it or fill it. If you use the stroke command, you are essentially creating an outline. If you use the fill command, using the fill style to actually fill the path or the object that you have just created. In my example on the right, I create the canvas. You can see the syntax up here. And then I create a path for a triangle, and at the very end I fill it. So I create a filled triangle. Let me postpone the discussion of these couple of elements up here till we see a complete example. I just wanted to summarize the main commands that we use when working with paths right now. And here's a complete example of how to create a basic line on our canvas. So this is familiar, HTML5. In this one example, we do everything inside the body, which is perfectly fine. Some programmers create the canvas and add the script inside the heading. That works as well. We're going to see an example of that too. So inside the body, I create a canvas. That's my two tags right here. I give it a name. This is really important because this is how you reference the canvas. You can have more than one canvas on your web page, and the only way for the browser to know which one you're painting into is by referencing its name. So I gave this one canvas the name My Canvas. I set it to have a width of 200 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. I want it to have a border. This by default, canvases do not have borders. So I add a CSS style to create the border. And that here is more or less redundant. Your browser doesn't support HTML5 will be displayed if and only if the canvas tag doesn't work. But as we just saw a couple of slides back, pretty much all the browsers support canvas. So it's a nice touch, but you don't have to have that there. And then the actual scripting is done, the actual drawing is done inside the script tags. Okay, we're going to talk in a lot more detail about JavaScript in a couple of weeks from now. Today we're just going to see a few basic commands on how to draw some basic stuff using JavaScript. So in between those two tags, I gotta create the canvas element, and I give it a 2D context. This eventually, they say canvas will support 3D as well, but for now you may assume that we're always going to start with something like this. And in fact, I got an canvas template for you that you can use further in my presentation. So these two lines basically tell the browser I want to be able to draw in my canvas. How do I draw? What do I do? I use the object that I've just created to move to the beginning of my coordinate system. So move 200 takes me to the start. Line 2 is going to draw a line from that point to the point with coordinates 200, 100. And then this is all just creating a path. No drawing is happening on the screen yet. Finally, I put that line on the screen with the stroke command. And it's as simple as that. So this will result in creating a small canvas, 200 by 100 pixels large, and then drawing a line from one end to the other. A few additional functions that you will find useful in addition to the path one. So like I said, move to works like picking up a pencil and just placing it in another location. Line 2 draws a line from the current drawing position to the position specified by X and Y. Arc and Arc 2 are used for drawing arcs and circles. Okay, the big one here, the first one, draws an arc which is centered at X and Y, so this is the center. Um, it, it's got a radius of R, and it has a starting angle at start angle and ending at end angle, going in the given direction indicated by that last argument here, which by default is true. Anti-clockwise means you're drawing the arc going anti-clockwise. Okay, the other one, arc 2, draws an arc with the given control points and radius. So the first point coordinates are x, y, y1, x1, y1. The second point is x2, y2, and then the radius is specified in the last argument. And finally, it turns out you can also, using paths, you can draw rectangles. You don't have to use those three functions that I showed you in the very beginning. You can just make that rectangle part of the path. So this last command you see here draws a rectangle whose top left corner is specified by X and Y, and you give it a width and a height. Over here on the right side, you see an example of how you can draw a smiley face. So I create my canvas. I begin the path. This first command here draws the outer circle, the big one. Okay, 2 times pi is how you draw an entire circle. And in fact, that last argument is completely redundant because it doesn't really matter whether you draw it clockwise or anti-clockwise. Next, I jump to the mouth, and then using pi, I draw half a circle. Okay, so that puts the mouth as part of the path. I then jump to the left eye, draw a complete circle, jump to the right eye, draw a complete circle, and the last command here puts everything onto the screen, and I get to see the smiley face that you see here at the bottom. Okay, a complete example of drawing a circle is on the next slide. A few additional useful commands that you can use for setting the color in Canvas. We use fill style and stroke style. This is the actual syntax. So once we have created the canvas, fill style specifies what color we're going to be using. You're already familiar with this. This is CSS color. There's 4 different ways to set the color in CSS. Use the name, use the hex code, or use RGB or RGB alpha to specify the color. And these here are all examples of orange. And finally, how do we display text? There's 2 commands for that, fill text and stroke text. I'm going to help you place some text onto the canvas. The first one fills a given text at the given position, X and Y. Uh, the next argument is completely optional. It basically specifies how thick the text should be. And stroke text strokes a given text at the given position, again with an optional width. To stroke the text simply means that you display it as hollow text, so it's really just an outline. You can try this on your own. Instead of all the text showing in all black as you see it here, it's really just going to be an outline. And an example of how to place that hello world, you can see that down here. On the next slide, there's a complete example of how to implement this hello world program. And one final example, which takes this one step further. We got 2 rectangles here. We're using RGB alpha to create partial transparency for the second rectangle that we display onto the canvas. Okay, so we first place the red one, then slightly offset from it, we display the blue one. And I'm going to let you look into this into more spending more time with this on your own. I will upload the presentation into the weekly folder. We are moving on to the next slide, which is one of the possible canvas templates. If you recall, I told you earlier, you can have all the code inside the body, or here's an example of a different way of setting up the canvas. You can have everything in the heading. The script is there, the styling is there, and all we do inside the body is we create the canvas. Now this one function that you see here, onload, allows you to execute any method that you have implemented in your HTML page the moment the page loads. Now, people usually use this for pop-up boxes or for redirecting you to another web page. We're using it here to basically tell the browser to draw the canvas for us. So it's just another way of setting up a canvas and drawing in it. You can, if you are using Canvas, you can go with either one. It's really your choice, whichever one method makes more sense to you. Alright, I'm going to stop the video here and continue in just a moment.